Raiden, Jack the Ripper, the third in a line of cyborg-ninjas seen throughout the Metal Gear series. This is the third and final part in a series of videos measuring the powers and skills of the Metal Gear Solid protagonists. In the two previous videos, I covered Solid Snake and Big Boss, so please give those videos a watch after checking out this one. There's a lot to say about Raiden. Being trained in Snake's image, rather than sharing his DNA, he has a fair few more distinctions between Snake and Big Boss, and doesn't necessarily possess the prior character's soldier genes. There are three distinct versions of Raiden that I'll be covering: Base Raiden, or the Raiden seen throughout the events of MGS2's Plant chapter, the original Cyborg Raiden, seen throughout MGS4, and the Advanced Cyborg Raiden from Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. I'll also be covering a fan theory regarding the events of Metal Gear Solid Ghost Babel, and present my own hypothesis as to where Raiden may have gained certain skills throughout his years as a In regards to Rising and its continuity, Kojima has stated that Rising acts as a sort of parallel continuation after the events of Metal Gear Solid 4, even going as far to imply the universe Rising hails from is an alternate timeline in the opening text crawl in Ground Zeroes' Yamas-Vu mission, still having the events of the core saga taking place, but resulting in a different future. This is reflected in Rising's story, which makes it clear that the greater events of the saga, the Outer Heaven Uprising, Shadow Moses, the Big Shell incident, and the Guns of the Patriots incident all took place. So, while Rising may not be connected to the main Kojima timeline, the core saga is canon to Rising, meaning the feats and skills Raiden shows in those games would carry over into Rising. With that said,
I think it's time for Jack to let her rip!
Raiden's greater history is unknown, even to him. Sometime in the 1980s, the young Jack's parents were killed by the perfect clone of Big Boss, Solidus Snake. He would then be drafted into Solidus's Army of the Devil, leading the small boys unit of child soldiers at the age of 6. During this time, Solidus ingrained in Raiden an affinity for bladed weapons, teaching Raiden that weapons, such as knives, are more honorable than guns. His impressive kill record throughout the Liberian Civil War would earn him the monikers of the White Devil and Jack the Ripper, a murderous personality that would manifest in Raiden later in his life. After being found in a relief center by the Patriots, a shadowy organization fueled by a world-controlling AI, he would be drafted into the Army's Task Force 21, where he would undergo hundreds of virtual reality simulations throughout his training. Simulations including the events of MGS1 and the Tanker mission, with Raiden taking the place of Solid Snake. He would once again become the vector for Solid Snake during the events of MGS2, where he would unknowingly take place in a grand ruse concocted by the Patriots, who were testing whether or not they could outright create context as a means of establishing a greater control of society. This would manifest in Raiden taking the place of Solid Snake in a reconstruction of the Shadow Moses incident. The nitty-gritty of Metal Gear Solid 2's meta-narrative has been broken down by various people over the years, and continues to be analyzed further. There is even a fan theory that the Game Boy Color game Ghost Babel, set in an alternate timeline from the main saga, was actually a VR simulation underwent by Raiden. There's a great article on thesnakesoup.com that I'll be leaving in the description if you'd like to know more, but the long and short of it is, Ghost Babel is primarily centered around the army nation Outer Heaven, one that Raiden seems to be more or less oblivious to in MGS2. Meaning, while the writer of Ghost Babel may have intended for this theory to be true, it is mostly contradicted in the main Kojima canon. I'll probably make a video breaking down all the various Metal Gear timelines at some point in the future, but for now, in MGS2, Raiden underwent a live simulation to recreate the perfect soldier, Solid Snake. However, he's not necessarily one-to-one with Snake. As we know from MGS4, Snake was holding back throughout most of the saga by choosing not to use CQC. It is nonetheless remarkable for Raiden to have achieved what he did during the Tanker mission. The events of MGS2 would leave Raiden in a state of trauma, having to come face to face with his past as a child soldier and being forced to take the place of someone else. The words of Solid Snake telling Raiden to find his own name seemed to have become warped, with Raiden spiraling into alcoholism and PTSD. Raiden would lose himself in the years following Big Shell, abandoning his wife Rose to rescue a fallen comrade's child, Sonny, who was kidnapped by the Patriots. He would free the young child with the help of the Paradise Lost Army, being led by Big Boss's former lover and surrogate mother of Solid Snake, Eva, now going by the name Big Mama. Eva would entrust Raiden with the retrieval of what she believed to be Big Boss's, in reality Solidus's, corpse, which was being kept barely alive by the Patriots after his defeat at the hands of Raiden. Raiden would be captured in his pursuit of Big Boss, becoming the latest iteration of the Patriots' Perfect Soldier program, just as Frank Yeager before him. Most of his body would be replaced by enhanced cybernetics, before being rescued by the Paradise Lost Army, who would finally help him procure Solidus's body. After this, Raiden would wander the earth, learning the ways of tracking from an Alaskan shaman, until being called in by Eva to once again return to Solid Snake's side on the battlefield. Raiden would aid Snake multiple times throughout MGS4, battling the nanomachine-enhanced vampire, Vamp, a squadron of Metal Gear Geckos, halting the massive battleship Outer Haven with one arm, and clearing the path for Snake to enter the microwave hallway and finally put an end to the Patriots' control over the human race. After the events of Guns of the Patriots, Raiden would reunite with Rosemary, who would reveal to Raiden their son, John. After the apparent passing of Solid Snake, Raiden would heed the call as the New World's Keeper of Peace. He would join Maverick Security Counseling, with whom he would go rogue from after the killing of the African Prime Minister Namani by Desperado enforcement. After the collapse of the Patriots, a number of PMCs felt their pockets grow light after the fall of the war economy. Raiden would discover the identity of the PMC's leader, Senator Armstrong, and foil his plan to use his future position as President of the United States to rid the world of the weak to make way for the strong. Having to give in to his Jack the Ripper persona to accomplish his mission, he chose to strike out from Maverick and fight his own war.
Snake, you're a legend, and that's why I need to ask you this.
Legend? A legend is nothing but fiction. Someone tells it, someone else remembers. Everybody passes it on.
I'm here because I was assigned to this mission, not because I want to. If I could, I'd be out of here in a second. How could you come back to all this? Why keep fighting?
There's something my best friend said to me once.
What?
We're not tools of the government or anyone else. Fighting was the only thing I was good at, but at least I always fought for what I believed in.
Raiden's military career started earlier than most. As I mentioned previously, he was a captain of his own platoon by the age of 6. Throughout his VR missions, he most likely share a comparable skill level with Solid Snake, at least within the parameters of the Shadow Moses and Tanker mission. This means any skill showing seen therein could be applicable to Raiden. There is some contention within the series on how accurate VR is, seen in Raiden's exchange with Snake about the topic.
I've had extensive training, the kind that's indistinguishable from the real thing.
Like what?
Sneaking mission 60, weapons 80, advanced
VR, huh?
but realistic in every way.
A virtual grunt of the digital age, that's just great.
That's far more effective than live exercises.
You don't get injured in VR, do you? Every year a few soldiers die in field exercises.
There's pain sensation in VR and even a sense of reality and urgency. The only difference is it isn't actually happening.
That's the way they want you to think, to remove you from the fear that goes with battle situations.
I've gone through VR training of the tanker mission before.
Yeah? Well, I doubt it accurately simulates the events of that mission.
It's implied in MGS2 that the events that Raiden, and by extension we the player, experienced in the tanker mission is a slightly inaccurate simulation of a mostly unseen true event. It's also implied that the VR missions Raiden experienced are the actual VR missions seen within the game Metal Gear Solid VR missions. This opens up the possibility that every game up to this point has been some kind of simulation, which is a topic that has been debated since the game's release. Assuming the Shadow Moses mission Raiden experienced is the one that the player experienced within MGS1, Raiden would scale pretty identically to Solid Snake, at least up until Big Shell. This would most likely grant him a genius-level IQ based on Snake's 180 IQ. As we know from Metal Gear Solid 4, Snake withheld from using CQC until later in life, meaning Raiden would most likely not know the martial art. The only big conflicting evidence towards this is a seemingly post-Revengeance Raiden's appearance in MGS5, where within the game itself, he can perform the same level of CQC as Big Boss. This is shaky at best, seeing as the mission is labeled a pseudo-historical recreation, so he can't necessarily take its details at face value. Raiden would know CQB, however, a combat system focusing on infantry with small arms, assuming limited space. According to my good buddy over at the Chadwick, Raiden would showcase skills in judo, jiu-jitsu, and Thai boxing against Senator Armstrong. Like Snake, he can use and pick up any weapon he finds and use them with proficiency. Raiden's greatest skill showings are with his weapon of choice, blades. He was able to beat Solidus, a master swordsman in his own right. He was able to go blow for blow with Vamp, a quote,
wizard with knives.
In both duels, Vamp seemed to have the edge, with Raiden having to resort to trickier tactics to stay alive, like stabbing through himself to get to Vamp, or appearing beaten to get the drop on him. He's insanely skilled as a sword fighter, combining a traditional style, perhaps Kenjutsu, with capoeira, allowing him to hold off a room full of trained swordsmen while literally unarmed. He defeated an AI-controlled robot whose intellect was, by its own words, far beyond human reckoning. He was eventually able to beat Jetstream Sam, a swordsman who at first fodderized Raiden before being bested by Raiden in their second duel. And remember how in MGS2 it's implied Raiden's VR training was compromised of the VR missions from Metal Gear Solid 1? Well, in a number of those missions, he'd take the place of Gray Fox, potentially granting Raiden comparable skill feats to Frank Yeager.
Raiden, we don't carry guns to take people down. We're not here to help some politician either.
You can say that because you're a legend, a hero.
Legends don't mean a whole lot.
People will remember only the good part, the right part of what you did.
There's no right part in murder. Not ever. And we're not in this to make a name for ourselves.
Then what are you and Otacon fighting for?
A future. You can stop being part of a mistake. Starting now.
His base was unable to break from his handcuffs, in contrast to Snake, meaning he was unable to produce more than 495 pounds of force. After his cyborg enhancements, it's evident that Raiden is on a whole nother level. He was able to casually swing multiple Metal Gear Geckos around. He would then go to halt Outer Haven while missing an arm. Outer Haven's mass has been calculated to 3,104,758.300 metric tons. In his advanced body, his strength remains consistent as he's able to toss a Metal Gear Ray unit. Ray is larger than Metal Gear Rex, which weighs 505 metric tons. He was also able to do the same to Metal Gear Excelsis, which has been calculated to weigh between 9,000 and 15,000 tons. All of these feats would place Raiden in Class G, to use power scaling terms, meaning he could lift the mass of the largest man-made structures. In contrast with lifting strength, Raiden's speed is insane off the bat. He was able to dodge a shot from Fortune's railgun, as stated in prior videos. Railguns in Metal Gear fire at 100 kilometers a second or 62 miles per second, meaning Raiden in his base alone has massively hypersonic reaction times. On multiple occasions, Raiden showcased the ability to control electricity, both to call lightning and to imbue his weapons and body with an electric aura. This could very well be natural lightning and not some form of electrical discharge, as the sound design implies clouds and rolling thunder. The average speed of lightning is Mach 1294, or massively hypersonic plus. In Metal Gear Rising, while having a slightly improved cyborg body from MGS4, Raiden showcases relative reaction times, being able to casually jump from missile to missile. With his advanced body, in conjunction with his Jack the Ripper mode, a mental state that doesn't necessarily boost Raiden stats, but more so allows him to become more violent, he achieved sub-relativistic speeds, or between 1 and 5% the speed of light, this being based on the speed of his sword strikes and relativity to the raindrops. Base Raiden's attack potency would be multi-city block, based on his destruction of multiple Metal Gear Ray units. In Metal Gear Solid 4, he produced a similar level of joules when he halted Outer Haven, as well as when he destroyed a Metal Gear Ray at the beginning of Revengeance. Newton's third law would be showcased when Raiden survived Metal Gear Excelsis' utter destruction after severely damaging it, a small town plus level feat. With his Ripper mode, he would scale to town level, seeing as he produced joules equivalent to approximately 14 590 kilotons of TNT when he sliced through an armored vehicle at sub-relativistic speeds, meaning in his advanced cyborg body, he'd be able to both withstand and output enough destructive energy to destroy an entire town. In his base form, we can assume he'd share Solid Snake's resistances, at least up to the Shadow Moses incident, meaning Raiden would most likely be able to resist Mantis's mind control, just as Snake did in Metal Gear Solid 1. As well, Raiden was unable to have his muscle movements read by Vamp, and again, Raiden would have had to face a simulated Gray Fox who could also read muscle movements, with his razor-sharp awareness. Given that Raiden might have assumed Gray Fox's position in VR, he too would be able to read muscle movements. His skull suit would provide him protection against toxins and some degree of protection from extreme temperatures. His cyborg body would prove more resilient, as he was sure he could survive the microwave hallway, granting him a measure of radiation resistance. His pain is mitigated while outside of Jack the Ripper mode, seeing as when he is out of it, he barely reacts to sustaining heavy injuries. In the previously mentioned ambiguously accurate Yamaz-Vu mission, Raiden was stated to be immune to body snatching.
Snake, leave this to me. I'll go to the server room.
The corridor's full of microwaves. One of us is enough.
My body is a machine. I can take it.
Your body may be a machine, but your heart is human. You've got a life to go back to.
She means nothing to me now.
Raiden, look at me. You still have your youth. Don't waste it. You can start over. From here on, this is my fight. We tore the world apart. Made your life a living hell. It's my duty to put an end to all of this.
All right. Now make sure they don't get through.
Raiden's standard arsenal, outside of handguns, rifles, and rocket launchers, includes a high-frequency blade, a blade which ignores durability by slicing atoms at the molecular level, which can be set to stun. Raiden eventually acquired Jetstream Sam's Murasama blade, a sword with an explosive discharge in the hilt, allowing for a, quote, lightning-fast draw. A high-frequency longsword granting him greater reach, the heavy-hitting armor breaker sword, the stun blade, a sword infused with a 2 million volt current, capable of shutting down cyborgs or AI-controlled combatants. Raiden is capable of adapting to use seemingly any variation of weapon, being able to analyze an opponent's battle data and wield their weapons with comparable skill, such as with Mistral's pole arm, Monsoon Psi Dystopia, which applies Lorentz force to magnetically pull Raiden towards his opponent and potentially overcharge their cybernetics, and Sundowner's Bloodlust, two heavy-hitting high-frequency machetes. His base form wears the Skull Suit, a variation of Sneaking Suit which regulates blood, as well as possesses soundproof heels. The Soliton Radar, a radar which can detect an enemy's field of vision and has been shown to detect spirits. He has an anti-personnel sensor, a sensor which detects the enemy's heartbeats and body temperatures and converts it into vibrations. He has thermal and night vision goggles, perhaps a variation of the Solid Eye, a goggle which has built-in binoculars that have up to a 10,000% zoom, light-amplifying night vision, battlefield information, as well as sensors to detect the emotional state of the opponent. His AR vision would gather infrared and radar information from the surrounding to locate enemies, as well as weapons and items. He could as well interface with the internet, creating holographic displays that only he could see. He has stealth camouflage to render him invisible to the naked eye. He has the brown wig, which provides Raiden with infinite ammo, the blue wig, which provides him with an endless amount of oxygen, and an orange wig, which grants him infinite grip strength, allowing him to indefinitely hold onto ledges and such. Wig A, B, and the Blade Mode wig, wigs that grant his cyborg body infinite ammo, infinite blade mode, and endless fuel for his Jack the Ripper enhanced blade mode. respectively. Raiden was as well equipped with health and stamina restoring items as repair units and electro. When all is said and done, Raiden is an incredibly powerful, highly skilled, cybernetically enhanced sword master. He has a blade which can practically cut through any opponent, enough means of detection to ensure they won't go unnoticed, and enough forms of aid to ensure Raiden stays and finishes the fight.
The war still rages within.
The thing is, after all this, Raiden still claims this about Solid Snake.
He knows what's right, and he just gets it done. Period. No one can stop him.